If you're working with products in Procreate and you want to cut them out and put them onto other backgrounds and bring in text and all sorts of things, very often what you want to do is you want to add shadows or reflections into the image to make it look that little bit more real. And of course, that's what I want to show you how to do in this next section. We're also going to add some Liquify so you can see how that works beautifully while trying to make something look, well, as realistic as possible. Now let's do a new image, and this is going to be for TikTok. So I'm going to click on the little plus over there. I'm going to make a new document which is 1000 wide by 1500 high. This is the 2x3 format. And I'm also going to check my color profile to make sure I'm on RGB and sRGB down there. And I'm going to click on Create. And I want to bring in a picture, but just before I do that, I'd like to just talk about positions on a canvas. Now, when we go to a canvas, I'm just going to choose a smaller brush over there. When you go to an image, whether it's a canvas or a photograph or whatever, there are certain parts of the image which are more powerful or they draw the eye in more than others. One of them is actually to make something right down the middle there and use symmetry. So you've got the same thing on both sides. It's not very down the middle. There we go. There. So you've got the same thing on both sides. And that's a really lovely composition that one can do. The second thing is you can have symmetry across the middle like that. However, if you're doing something across the middle, I would suggest that you never put it right in the middle. Put it just a little bit above the middle. This is known as the optical center. This is the true center, well, as close as I can get, but that's the optical center. So when you look at an image, your eye naturally sits just above the center over there. Not too high up, but just a small amount above that. And once again, it's used for composition and it's called the optical center, so slightly above the normal center line. But the other things we've got are things called the magic third. And this is where you divide an image up into three, like that. And let's have thirds going that way. So when you look at the composition, these lines here are the most powerful lines on the image. So compare that to something like that there, where you've just got sort of two lines in there. It looks okay, but having those other lines in there, the thirds, gives it a lot more power. Now, there are even more powerful positions on this image, and this is obviously where you want to put your brand, your image, the main focus of the image, and that's where these two thirds cross. Oops, let's go back to that one. So it's kind of there, 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 and there. And those areas there are the most pleasing areas on the image, and they are where most people's eyes will gravitate to. We'll talk a little bit more about composition later on in this course. But if you'd like to get your image up or get your canvas made, then go along and find an image to go in there. I'm using this image over here of a water bottle, and you can see right in the middle there, that's very, very powerful over there. The horizon is slightly above the middle, so it's not quite in the middle, it's just slightly above. As I said, that's more the optical. In fact, if we did that, that would be closer to the optical center going that way as well. But another way to put this image in would be to actually have it on the third over there, which gives it a lot more power, being on that third line in there. Yes, if you moved it across to that side there, you've got lots of room for text, but it loses the power that it has when it sits on that third line. Anyway, as I said, find this image and bring it in. This one came from Unsplash, and we'll move on from there. Get your image in and put it on the third, and don't forget to leave some room at the bottom because we're going to do a reflection down there. Now, sometimes when you have an image, especially if you're making it up yourself, you might find that you want to have a bit of a shadow or a reflection in the image. And I want to have a bit more of a reflection of this bottle down here. So let me show you how to make them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the selection tool, and I'm just going over to the freehand tool over here, and I'm going to basically cut a little bit of the bottle out like that. Oh, now let's just click over there to OK it. So what we've got here is all the lined area is the protected area, and this bit here is selected. And I don't think I got everything in there. You can see there's some lines going on over there. So I can go to add, and I can add this in over here. Let's just go and add that bit in. Now, I'd rather have too much than too little because I can always erase it later on or put a mask on when we do masks later. I'm going to go along to edit and copy, or if you're in the freehand tool, you can just say copy paste in there, and that'll automatically, if I just hide that, just copy and paste that section straight in there. Now, it does look a bit rough and ready, so I am going to take my erase tool over here with just a standard brush, maybe a little bit softer than that, so I can go in and just change my settings over there to soften it, or I can choose one of these other brushes. I think I'll actually go with medium hard blend in there. Take the size down a little bit, and I'm just going to erase out some of this over here. Now, as I said, this is a little bit rough and ready, but don't worry too much about it because you won't actually notice when we've finished what this looks like. I'm just going to take that and once again erase out this bit over there and this last bit down here. So now that I've got that on a layer, what I want to do is I want to flip it upside down and put it underneath the bottle. So I'm going to go over to my move tool, and down here I'm just going to say flip vertical, and I don't want to push it down there yet because if I do I will lose the bottom section, but that's going to go down there. You can see it looks rubbish at the moment. I will show you how we can fix that very shortly. Anyway, do try that out. Get something on a separate layer so you've got the bottom section on a separate layer so we can then adjust that as our reflection. Now I'm going to use the move tool once again, and I'm going to just push this down to there and maybe move it up a little bit like that. What I want to do now, because the reflection shouldn't actually go over like that, it should actually go around and follow. Move that down, you can see it should just follow the base of that. It shouldn't sort of go over there, it should go from there round that way. So I'm going to go along and I'm going to use the Liquify tool. The Liquify tool allows me to push things around. You can see I've got a very big brush there. You can change the brush size down here, and I'm on the push option. So now what I can do is I can just push with this Liquify tool to kind of move those bits down. If you use a brush which is too small, you're going to get something which looks really weird like that. So I always go with a big brush, probably bigger than I think I need. I can just push those down. This doesn't have to be perfect because nobody's going to look too closely at it. Just got to look vaguely like it's correct. Let's move that down into the right position, so roughly about over there. That's great. Now all I need to do is to change the opacity of that, and we'll have our little reflection over there. There we go. You can see it looks like the reflection. If I switch it on and off, you can see before and after. As I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just got to give the impression of it being a reflection. Do try that out. Let's bring in a bit of text. So same again as per usual, add some text. And just put in the word hydration in there. I think I'll just select it, change the color to maybe a white. And over here in my settings, after I've made sure I've got the right font, I would just go in over here to the tracking and just adjust the tracking slightly. I think I want something a little bit bigger like that. I don't want it too close together. Over there. Let me move that down into the right position over here. Now, the other thing that I want to do is I want to get more of a sort of a liquidy feel to that word hydration. And if I go along and I'll go back to my adjustments, down to Liquify, I can then liquify text as well. So I'll just make this brush a little bit smaller and I can then start to pull it up. Put up that H out a little bit. So maybe the N can come in. Over there. I'm happy with that. Come out of that. You'll see what's happened is it's taken the editable text and made it into just normal pixels, so I can treat it like any other pixels as well. I'm going to just take the opacity down on that bit of text. At any time, you can just go back in there again, and we can continue. So I'll make that H come in a little bit more like that. There we go. Have a bit of a play with that. Use the Liquify tool on some text. I'd like to create a bit of animation now, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to take all of these 3 layers, select them all, and group them together. And those which are all grouped together are going to be, when we go over to our animation assistant, those are all, if I click on here, going to be the background, so they'll be there all the time. And then what I want to do is I want to sort of have a painted area, so it almost looks like somebody's painting this whole background picture in. So I'm going to go and add a new frame over here. So let's click on the plus over there. And I'm going to fill this frame with, well, whatever color you want, really. I think I might go and choose an interesting blue, but make it a bit brighter over there. And then I'm just going to paint, use my standard brush, and fill that whole thing like so. So that's the first frame over there. So even though we go back to here, that will still be the first frame over there. And then I'm going to slowly start to reveal this using the erase tool and making copies of that layer. So let me go and find an interesting brush that I can work from. And I always like these ink ones. I think they're quite interesting. So that one, you can see if I erase it, we'll get something like that. So I need to have 1 or 2 frames over here, so this can sit for a moment in there. So I'm just going to say hold that for 5 frames. And I've then got the 5 frames over there. Then when we add another frame, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to duplicate that frame. Now this one here is also holding for 5, so I'm going to click on that one and just say that's going to be just be 1 frame in there. So do watch out for those hold frames, because it's easy to then just keep repeating the one that you've done, and then it's really slow. So with this one, what I'm going to do is just very simply take my brush and start to erase like that. And I'll do the same thing again and erase a bit more. And the same thing again. And erase some more of that. And I can just keep going until I've erased all the bits that I want to reveal that picture. You can see that my brush is not taking through 100% of that, or appearing not to, but it's actually not the brush itself. It's because of the onion skin that we've got in there. You'll see it will actually look okay later on. So let's duplicate that one, take out a bit more, duplicate again. I'll just leave a few little bits in there to give it that interesting look. Let's do that one over there. And one last one over here. We can get rid of that and most of that as well. And then that's pretty much it. But this last one here, I'm going to have it to hold on that frame for a while, so that people can see our amazing image. So for 30 frames in there, let's have a look at the settings. And I'm just going to take this down to 10 frames a second for now, and we'll play that. There's a bit of a funny jump over there. I might have to go back and have a look and see why I've got a frame that seems to hold on itself for a moment. Maybe I'll have to remove that. But do try that out, and you'll find you can do all sorts of really interesting effects over here. Start from the middle with the spiral and just keep working with the spiral, and you can get this sort of image to undo itself in there. Anyway, I'm going to sort mine out. You have a go with that, experiment with it, and see what you can get. Now I've done exactly the same thing, but I just started with a small circle and got bigger and bigger and bigger all the way out. Of course, you could do it the other way around, where you could actually start with painting it in and just start to paint and then paint more and paint more to get something to cover up. But you'll see there's my layers in there with small circles getting larger. So try all sorts of different experiments. If you want to try with a brush that's moving, you could do a little bit more of a brush and then some more and then some more and then some more to get an interesting effect from that. Remember, when you want to export this, go along to Actions. We're going to go along to Share, and you're going to be using Animated MP4. You can animate it out. Have fun with that and try some other versions. Don't forget to check out our other courses in Adobe, Affinity, and Canva.